Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing the 5 Elites of Wei Let's Talk Lore series with episode 3 of Yu Jin's arc titled A Fatal Blemish. Now previously, we have established Yu Jin as not only a capable officer, but also a strict and disciplined one. Because of this reputation, Cao Cao often leaned on Yu Jin's unit for either vanguard or rearguard duties in most of their campaigns. However, while Yu Jin's strict reputation earned him the trust of Cao Cao, Yu Jin's own troops were not huge fans of how they could never line their pockets with extra battle loots. Moreover, other generals within Cao Cao's ranks also had issues with Yu Jin's always by the books attitude, as even though they respected Yu Jin for it, they also hated how he sometimes made them look bad in comparison. Nonetheless, when Cao Cao declared himself as the Prince of Wei in 216, Yu Jin would get his just reward, as he would be named as the General of the Left for the Princedom Court, along with independent command for his unit. For the next few years, Yu Jin mostly remained as a defensive garrison general, while Cao Cao campaigned in Hanzhong, probably due to Yu Jin's age, as we know Yu Jin was likely already in his 20s during the initial Yellow Turban Rebellion in 184, so now 30 plus years later, he was definitely approaching his 60s. Yet when Cao Cao's son Cao Zhi had one too many cups to drink again in the fall of 219, Yu Jin would suddenly be thrusted into a role that would go on to define his entire military career. As you see, while Cao Cao was losing to Liu Bei in Hanzhong, Guan Yu launched an unexpected attack on Cao Ren's forces in the Jing Province. And because most of the resources were already sent west to support Cao Cao's massive Hanzhong campaign, Cao Ren's forces that were defending the twin cities of Xiangyang and Fan were caught off guard, especially as many local administrators defected to join forces with Guan Yu. The only thing Cao Ren could do was to hole up in Xiangyang, while General Peng De was ordered to do the same in Fan, and their only hope was that Cao Cao would pull reserve troops from the garrisons in the north to come reinforce them. And naturally, this is what Cao Cao decided to do, as 7 different garrisons in the north quickly pulled as many troops as they could spare to form a temporary army of 30,000 troops to reinforce Cao Ren in the Jing Province. The only issue left was picking a commander for this force. Initially, Cao Cao desperately wanted his son, Cao Zhi, to head this army, as Cao Cao leaned in favor of Cao Zhi over Cao Pi when it came to picking an heir. But Cao Zhi, who was an extremely talented scholar and poet, lacked military experience and accolades to inherit a land that remained in turmoil. Therefore, Cao Cao thought this would be an excellent opportunity for Cao Zhi to show that he is ready. However, Cao Zhi's addiction to alcohol proved to be his ultimate downfall, as instead of complying with his appointment, Cao Zhi ended up blackout drunk on the day that he was supposed to march out with the reinforcement army. This mistake became the final straw in the battle to become Cao Cao's heir, as Cao Cao finally realized that Cao Zhi was simply not cut out for the responsibilities of inheriting a kingdom. But that was a matter for the future. For the time being, with Cao Ren still in dire straits and Cao Cao still stuck in Chang'an after a hasty retreat out of Hanzhong, a new commander was still needed for this reinforcement army. And this task would fall onto Yu Jin, who now had to rush immediately to the Jing Province. Now, because of the way the cities were constructed, Fan was the gateway that was protecting Xiangyang, so Yu Jin would end up being ordered by Cao Ren to garrison his 30,000 troops with Peng De's garrison at Fan. While this move should have successfully blunted Guan Yu's attack, Mother Nature had other plans. As you see, in the late fall of 219, unnaturally heavy seasonal rainstorms had pounded the Han River that divided the twin cities of Xiangyang and Fan. Then, with no warnings, a flash flood devastated the north bank of the Han River as water level rose by many meters in just a few short hours, as the rising tide would erode past even the earthen wall of Fan drowning the garrison inside. Seizing upon this momentous opportunity, Guan Yu's army would ride in on their ships, surrounding Yu Jin and Pang De's forces. With his army drenched, drowning, and downright incapable of defending themselves, Yu Jin made a judgment call that would go on to forever haunt him as he offered the surrender of his entire 30,000 troops, while Pang De called to fight to the bitter end. In the end, Yu Jin's decision was probably strategically correct, as Pang De would end up being easily captured before being executed by Guan Yu for refusing to surrender. Now, Pang De's case was extremely interesting, as he had been a general of Ma Teng and Ma Chao before working briefly for Zhang Lu. And in all three of these posts, he technically fought against Cao Cao. Then after Zhang Lu surrendered to Cao Cao, Pang De had the chance to escape with his old master Ma Chao, but decided to stay and surrender to Cao Cao alongside Zhang Lu. And now when he was captured by Guan Yu had actually offered Pang De mercy because Pang De's older cousin, Pang Rou, was an official in Liu Bei's court at the time. But Pang De basically asked to be executed, as he did not want to betray Cao Cao. Logically speaking, Pang De's decision might have been heavily influenced by the fact that he had 4 kids, including his eldest son Pang Hui, who were still residing in the north under Cao Cao's control. So in a sense, his loyal death probably bought his clan a much more favorable future. But regardless of Pang De's rationale, his determination to fight to the end and his will to get executed instead of surrendering only ended up making Yu Jin's surrender look worse, as later when Cao Cao heard about this battle, he failed to comprehend how Yu Jin, someone who he had known and trusted for over 30 years, failed to perform when the going got tough, while Pang De, who had just surrendered to join his rank a few years ago, made all the right decisions. Now, because Guan Yu was still in the middle of the siege after the flooding attack, Yu Jin was sent back to Jiangling as a prisoner of war. However, Guan Yu himself would never make it back to Jiangling, as Sun Quan's betrayal and Lu Meng's attack would end up shifting the control of Jiangling to Sun Quan's hands, and thus Yu Jin became a prisoner of war under Sun Quan. And during his stay in Wu, Yu Jin was treated with respect from Sun Quan, who allowed him to ride with his staff and join in banquets, even though Sun Quan's own advisor, Yu Fan, constantly reminded Yu Jin to mind his place as a prisoner of war. Now, because Sun Quan eventually submitted himself as a vassal to Cao Pi after the death of Cao Cao in 220 and Cao Pi's usurpation of the Han, many in the Wei court now expected Yu Jin's return. But for a long time, Sun Quan was dragging his feet. And when Sun Quan's court ended up debating about Yu Jin's return, Yu Fan would once again speak up, as he argued that while he was sure that the Wei court would never use Yu Jin again after his embarrassing surrender, and thus returning him would not damage Wu's interest in the future, it still feels like letting a bandit go for free. So, instead, Yu Fan suggested that they should execute Yu Jin to set an example for all their generals to never surrender in the future. In the end, Sun Quan ended up ignoring Yu Fan's suggestion and decided to let Yu Jin go. On the day of Yu Jin's release, Yu Fan made sure to tell Yu Jin to not underestimate Wu's talent, as he's only lucky to leave alive because Sun Quan didn't take his advice. Clearly, Yu Fan was not a fan of Yu Jin's surrender, but strangely enough, it was recorded that Yu Jin was quite impressed by Yu Fan despite all the cutting remarks. When Yu Jin finally returned to Luoyang to meet Cao Pi, it was recorded that Yu Jin looked extremely frail with a full head of white hair, and that he cried as he bowed down to the new emperor Cao Pi. Cao Pi would comfort him with stories of past surrender generals from the Spring-Autumns period, as he would go on to imitate those kings of the past, as he would restore Yu Jin's titles while promoting him to Anyuan Jiangjun, or the general who calms the frontiers. Cao Pi would then recite the story of when the founding emperor of the Han, Liu Bang, gifted his own robes to General Han Xin to demonstrate his appreciation for the general, before Cao Pi himself gifted Yu Jin one of his hats and an old robe strand from when Cao Pi was the Prince of Wei. And given Yu Jin's newfound knowledge of the Wu court, Cao Pi even planned to make Yu Jin ambassador to Wu. But first, he ordered Yu Jin to travel to Ye to pay his respect to Cao Cao's tomb. Now, here is where the story takes a turn, as on the surface, it would appear that Cao Pi made every effort to welcome Yu Jin back. But in reality, Cao Pi was only trying to use this opportunity to mimic actions of renowned emperors of the past to help elevate his own standing as a founding emperor, when deep down inside, Cao Pi had not forgiven Yu Jin. And we know this because Cao Pi ended up ordering a mural of Guan Yu's flooding of the seven armies drawn next to Cao Cao's tomb, so that Yu Jin would see it when visiting. The painting was made sure to show Pang De as a hero who remained defiant, while Yu Jin cowered in fear. And sure enough, after seeing the painting himself, Yu Jin felt incredibly ashamed, as he would eventually fall ill before dying not soon after. His posthumous temple title would become Li Hou, or the Cruel Marquis. And this was a clear sign of the Wei court's displeasure with Yu Jin, as Li is a classical temple title that was often reserved for particularly damaging lords who were either excessively cruel, brutal, or bad for the country. Yu Jin's son, Yu Gui, did inherit Yu Jin's low-tier marquis title, but did not go on to have a military or political career in Wei, probably also because of his father's shameful surrender. And with that, our series on Yu Jin comes to an end. When we return next time, we'll move on to our next member of the 5 elites of Wei in Zhang He. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more contents on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!